Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6:01 PM. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Here.
Mrs. Lima?
Here.
Mrs. Shockley?
Here.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. Dixon? Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. LeBlanc will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and describe the emergency evacuation plan.
I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It's an emergency. Go out the back door. Take a left.
Thank you. I would like to ask for a moment of silence for a longtime resident and community volunteer, Sandra Lukowitz, who died over the weekend. We are very saddened by this loss. She was a vocal advocate for good government and all things historical. She was a member of the Coventry Planning Commission and president of the Coventry Historical Society. At another meeting, we will provide a longer description of Mrs. Lukowitz's contributions to our town. Agenda C, approval of Town Council meeting minutes, March 7th, 2022, reference pages 7 to 12. Madam Clerk, did you receive any corrections?
No, I did not.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the minutes for March 7th, 2022?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Members of the council, may I have a motion to adjourn into executive session for the following. Per Rhode Island General Law 42465A12, close pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A1 for discussion of job performance, character, physical or mental health of a person or persons, specifically for the council to interview potential moderator candidates for the financial town meeting to be held on May 24th, 2022 at 7 PM at the Coventry High School Auditorium, and close pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42465A5 for a discussion or consideration related to the acquisition or lease of real property for public purposes or of the disposition of publicly held property wherein advanced public information would be detrimental to the interests of the public with the land trust. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call. Mrs. Ludwig. Miss Ludwig.
Yes.
Mrs. Lima.
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. We are now going to remove ourselves to the executive session room. Thank you. Members of the council, may I have a motion to adjourn from executive session?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. May I have a motion to seal the minutes of the executive session?
So moved.
May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mr. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Members of the public, the town council met for the following agenda items. For Rhode Island General Law 42465A12, closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Law 42465A1 for discussion of job performance, character, physical, or mental health of a person or persons, specifically for the council to interview potential moderator candidates for the financial town meeting to be held May 24th, 2022 at 7 p.m. at the Coventry High School auditorium. The council interviewed 2 candidates. No votes were taken. A vote will take place later in this meeting. And closed pursuant to Rhode Island General Laws 42465A5 for a discussion or consideration related to the acquisition or lease of real property for public purposes or of the disposition of publicly held property wherein advance public note information would be detrimental to the interests of the public with the land trust. The council did not discuss this agenda item. The speaker was unable to be present. Members of the council, may I have a motion to add public comment agenda item after the performance audit presentation? This will be a short public comment specifically for the performance audit. An additional public comment session will be held at the end of the meeting. So may I have a motion to add an additional public comment?
I'll make a motion. I'll
Thank
second
you.
it.
Roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mr. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Agenda D, Joint Town Council and School Committee Session. Chairperson Patno, please open your meeting.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to call the Coventry School Committee open. I have 7:05. I'll do the roll. David Florio.
Here.
Donna Colunian.
Yeah.
James Pearson.
Here.
Catherine Patnode here. Mr. Levis.
Here.
And Mr. Cowett.
Here.
Here. Thank you. All set.
Thank you. Our presenter this evening is Alan Pennington, Vice President of Matrix Consulting Group, who will present the performance audit report. Mr. Pennington, welcome. I spoke with Mr. Pennington early today, and I asked him if he would like to have questions asked after the report or during the presentation, and he said either one would be okay with him. So if you have questions that you would like to ask him, either from the school committee side or from the town council side, feel free to ask questions as they come up and you would like to ask the question. And he'll also entertain questions after. And then, as we mentioned before, at the end of this presentation, we will also have public comment. Mr. Pennington, welcome, and welcome back to Rhode Island again.
Thanks, it's good to be back. And appreciate the opportunity to present sort of the final presentation on this. Although I do want to extend the opportunity that as you move forward with implementation, ask questions, you should feel free to reach out at any time for our input, background, whatever we can do this with. Since we spent about a month ago some time going through the draft report, most of the recommendations are the same. So I'm going to take a little bit of different approach when we get to the recommendation. But I'm going to do a little bit of the setup just for the listening public and make sure we're all on the same page. Remember, this performance audit had a very broad scope, and basically allowed a review of all aspects of town and school operations and departments in different areas, looking at departmental efficiency and effectiveness, staffing requirements, resource management, program effectiveness. It had opportunities for input from various stakeholder groups, including elected officials, top executive management of both towns and schools. Opportunities were made to all union representatives to talk with our project team, and we allowed all employees an opportunity to provide input during open employee survey. And reiterate what I said before, that there was some strong support from both the town and the school side of providing information, making their staff available to our project. Having said that, it doesn't mean they agree with 100% of what we say or every recommendation, but they did totally support us and talk with us about the process. So a few things I do want to highlight, because neither the town nor the schools have been sitting on their hands waiting for this audit to be done. You were doing a lot of these before we started the performance audit, continued it throughout, and I anticipate you're going to continue moving forward. And I think that approach at continuous improvement is important.
I'm sorry. It is an important undertaking for the organization to continually improve. You can't rest on your laurels of what you've been doing. And we just wanted to highlight a few things that have been undergoing changes while we've been working with you. On the town side, updating of the personnel policies. I understand you've talked about them recently. Thank you for not having me on the same agenda, I guess. But various financial policies, town strategic plan. Those are three major undertakings that the town has been working through over the last several months. Similarly, on the school side, they've been doing things like fully staffing their business office. You know, it was something that they knew they needed to do, and they were moving forward with that. Enhancing the curriculum selection to better align with state requirements, strong focus on special education and using data to determine cost-effective approaches and solutions. So I just want to highlight a few of those things. There's many other things that they've been doing, but most of what we're going to talk about are things that we're going to say you should be doing. So it's great to know you're already undertaking a lot of efforts. We can move to the next one, Cody. Jointly, I want to sort of set the stage for the greatest success. And I think the things that you're going to achieve that I heard all of you mention at different times, and we heard from staff, is only going to happen if you continue a strong working relationship between these two organizations. Your success as a town is going to be dependent upon the two organizations working together. I'll just say it that strongly and directly. They cannot operate as two separate entities, even though legally, when they're spending money, there are separation of duties and powers and obligations, and those need to be respected. But there is not enough money right now to meet every need. And the only way you're going to prioritize it appropriately is working together. There's also a lot of opportunities to achieve some of the efficiencies and cost effectiveness that the organizations want, but principally those are going to come in some cases through technology investments that are going to be joint, or potentially some joint services in the future. But this long-range financial planning, I think, is important so that those of you sitting on that side of the room have the information you need to make the right decisions. And I think that's what I'm hearing you need to grapple with, is these big policy decisions. So what staff needs to do and prepare for you and help you understand the implications of are things like annual review of the revenue projections, so you know what money is anticipated to come in. Annual review of the expenditure projections, not just an annual budget, but long-term projections. Looking at capital investments, and I know you spent a lot of time over the last year talking about capital investments, especially on the school side. It is one of the largest needs on both sides of the town and the schools, and it has been in comparison to what we would see in other communities, under capitalized and not given the attention it needs. And you don't even have, in some cases, especially on the town side, a really good understanding of the total investments needed. The schools, you're in a little bit better shape because you've had a lot more recent effort focused on identifying those costs in preparation for the bonds. Doing things like annual review of fees and charges, salaries and benefits, and debt management approaches. Those are things that just as policymakers, you should be at some point, whether it's prior to the budget, which is typically better than during the budget, looking at these things to set up this long-range financial plan, keeping the out years really in focus rather than just the next year. We can go to the next one. So I have grouped the recommendations because I was worried about boring you and reiterating everything we told you last time. So I sort of regrouped these into the three buckets again: things that need to be done jointly, things that are solely the towns, and things that are solely the schools. But one of the things we did in the final report was put in an implementation plan, sort of a time frame. I thought we were pretty aggressive. I think staff may try to be more aggressive because there's a lot of things they want to do and accomplish. So we wanted to sort of give you a highlight by saying, here's things that should be ongoing efforts. Here's things you should sort of try to accomplish this calendar year and things next year. So joint efforts are the MOU on financial arrangements between the two entities and how you're going to interact on budgeting and other things, and developing some turnover reports to understand why employees are leaving and the organizations. Those are things that should just be ongoing efforts. That shouldn't be a one and done. But key things within 2022 is updating the financial policies. And you remember, this is something we put on both sides for the towns and the schools. Even where the town has the right to implement certain financial policies, you need to have the schools involved in the development of those to make sure they meet the needs appropriately. And beginning the financial system replacement, if you decide to move forward with that, which we do think is important. Let me reiterate again, whether you replace it or not, the most critical thing is both organizations stay on the same financial system. And I think there are some real key indicators that you do need to replace it to get what you need for both organizations functioning in an appropriate way, and to provide you some of the automated processes, both for payroll, purchasing, and just general transactional processing that will allow your staff to be more efficient and effective, and would offset the need for future staff in the future. Moving into 2023, there's only 4 items listed here jointly. They're pretty big items. Enhancing the CIP, the capital investment program process, is a pretty heavy lift to develop that out fully. Beginning the selection and implementation of the asset management software. Just like the financial software, we would suggest that be a joint effort between the town and the schools. It'll be more cost effective. It will ensure you have data in a way that you can do the long range capital planning for both organizations in a consistent manner. And it will give you better visibility on what your real financial needs are in the future. But that is a multi-year implementation effort, but it needs to start somewhere. So we're suggesting 2023. Having discussions and looking at the potential future consolidation of facility maintenance and custodial consolidation. If you remember from last time, and I'll reiterate again, that is one opportunity down the road where the two organizations could work together more closely in terms of shared services. And looking at, in the short term, also, if there are ways for some joint HR and training opportunities or some benefits administration areas where the two organizations could work together. Training is an easy opportunity, identifying some courses or whether that's skills enhancement or regulatory enforcement like sexual harassment, diversity training, those type of things, where you can do it for both organizations more easily and more cost effectively. We can go to the next one, Cody. On the town side, the ongoing effort, kudos for getting your first strategic plan updated, as this group and with this administration. That needs to be an ongoing thing. That really sets the stage for how the town should be managing its operations. And we've tied a few things to that in our report, including development of annual work plans for departments and performance measures that should cascade down from your strategic goals to drive how you're making budget decisions. But some key things in 2022, filling of some key positions, and I know many of these you've interviewed, you're already down the road with some of these: assistant town manager, deputy finance director, and addressing the parks and recreation positions that were eliminated. Adopting a personnel manual, absolutely, I think very critical to move the organization forward, to set the standards that you're going to use. And having those expectations clear. One of the things we heard in the employee survey, you may remember we talked a little bit about last time, is part of the issue is there isn't an understanding of all the rules and regulations that are in place, and people are looking for clarity. We're not saying we didn't review the draft that you looked at to say, yes, this is it. What's important is you get something in place that everyone knows what those rules are so you can manage your organization effectively. Adopting the financial policies And that's not going to be a one and done either, but getting at least a base in there. Developing an IT strategic plan, because you'll notice in the report, there's a huge emphasis on replacing some IT systems, integrating some systems on both sides. At least for the town side, that IT strategic plan is going to be more critical because their systems are not as advanced or as developed as some of those on the school side, or as specialized. So this will help make sure you have the resources you need in the focus. And then getting the planning department utilizing the existing permitting system that is in place. We go to the next one. In 2023 is where we talk about implementing the department work plans and performance measures, implementing a purchasing policy, some additional position enhancements, IT, town clerk, long-range planner, code enforcement, and town engineer. Some additional technology investments on the land records management system and the dog licensing system. Creating a sewer maintenance plan and division. So that's both an organizational structure thing as well as a plan for maintenance. And considering consolidation of the mechanic and custodial operations on the town side, all into one central operation for the entire organization. On the school side, it is a smaller list, and I do want to highlight one reason the list is a little bit smaller is we have to remember that when we were looking at compliance with what I would call best practices or regulatory environment, the school is much more highly regulated than the town is in terms of state statutes that they have to comply with in terms of day-to-day operations. So there are things in place there that aren't in place on the town side simply because there isn't a statute that requires it. There are still things that need to be done. Ongoingly, we're saying continue this annual evaluation of class size and class enrollments and get rid of those that have low enrollment, low utilization for cost effectiveness, and continue to implement a 5-year plan for facility condition assessments. I say implement, but I do want to sort of say it's sort of continue. You did a lot of effort over the last couple of years developing a lot of data about the condition of your facilities. You really should be done every 5 years. And that would feed into the asset management program that we talked about. The downside of doing that is it's going to highlight a pretty large number in terms of the investments required, which requires this group to then prioritize where you're going to put the limited resources you have. In 2022, we talked about a few technology issues and trying to expand Aspen and integrate the MTSS data into existing systems, trying to better integrate that data and utilize existing resources that were out there, and sharing and maybe publicizing a little bit more the salary survey effort that is done on the school side in terms of preparation for collective bargaining, but also to help people understand how the Coventry school systems compares to others on salaries. That information is done and it can be expanded, but part of this is sharing that information to make sure people understand what is happening. The principal staffing recommendation we made there in 2023 was hiring 3 facility maintenance workers. That number could change based upon other investments you make in capital, but at least at the minimum, that is the minimum we think needed to be added to maintain the existing infrastructure appropriately. It doesn't address all remediation or upgrades, but just sort of maintenance. I talked a little bit about future opportunities, and I think while I know the last year's been a year of a lot of changes and a little bit of stress at times in terms of working together, I think, as I understand, some of the things you're planning in the coming budget show that there are some real opportunities for the two organizations to continue working together and work further. And I want to highlight some where we have seen the greatest success from schools and towns working together and the greatest cost savings if they implement them. That has to do with equipment sharing, fleet maintenance and management, doing those jointly. It can lead to IT support, and that can be systems like document management, online service provision. It can also be sharing staff. Purchasing of goods and services. There's really no reason for those goods or services that both organizations are using that you don't look at joint purchasing, especially for commodities where you get pricing discounts based upon volume, but also for services. We talked a little bit about human resources, and that can range from, using a consistent approach for collective bargaining support, but it can also be staff training, some benefit program consolidation for administration. But these are the areas where you could really get some true dollar cost savings, as well as building up the positive working relationships that you can build upon in the future. And this can be a two-way street. We've seen it work where in some cases the town will take the lead on something. Let's say the town takes the lead on purchasing, and they do purchasing for both organizations in some areas. In other cases, the schools may take the lead and say, hey, we have the biggest custodial operation, so why don't we take the lead on that, and the town gets their services through us. All it requires is developing service level agreements. I'm not saying this is a panacea, but it's an opportunity where you have the ability to work together. You're demonstrating to the public that we not only are we working together, but we're doing it cost effectively, and we're making the best use of the limited tax dollars. So when you do go ask for more, they know you're spending it wisely. Some of these opportunities also provide the opportunity to limit future staffing requirements in addition to increasing efficiency and effectiveness. And we can go to the next one. I'm going to stop there for questions or comments. I know that was relatively quick. I tried to condense the biggest issues in the three buckets in the three time periods. There's nothing magical about the ongoing, the 2022, 2023. We tried to break it. There are some things that we have in 2023. You'll see in our report are high priority, and we think you should do them as quick as you can. We were also trying to be cognizant of what we know about the capacity within the town and the capacity within the schools, that there's only so much you can do at once. And with the new staff coming on, that gives you a little bit more capacity to do some of the things. But I was talking with Cody earlier, just the technology changes that you have in place, that's a big lift to develop RFPs, get them issued, working with the departments to make sure their needs are met, selecting a vendor and then beginning the implementation. That's an entire workload in addition to keeping your technology moving. And that's just one example. Same thing in the development of financial policies. You can easily develop one, but making it meet your needs, getting them in place, it's not something that you can just do overnight. It takes time and effort while the ongoing work is going. So we've tried to help you by giving some priority to them and phasing them in. You should phase them to meet your needs that align with your budget. If it takes you 3 years, 4 years, that's okay, as long as you're making progress. If you want to try to do them all shorter, that's great too, if you have the capacity to do that. What we didn't in most cases do is add any additional resources to directly implement those recommendations. So there are things you could do, like you could hire an IT consultant to help you select a vendor, a software solution. There are people that do that. We tried to phase it where you could do it within the existing resources or with the additional resources that were recommended within the report. So the assistant town manager, deputy finance director gave you some additional capacity. An additional IT position helps shore up what we think is a gap in current need, but also provide some capacity to do some of the other things we recommended. So that's sort of the broad approach we took. I'll stop here, answer any questions. Be happy to talk about anything in detail that you like.
Mrs. Patno, would you like to ask members of the school committee if they have any questions?
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Pearson, anything?
No questions at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Florio?
No questions, Madam Chair.
Mrs. Clunian?
I just have one question. I'm a little disappointed that you didn't go more in depth in the school as far as, the salaries and all of that. You kind of like me, maybe went down one level, but not, really deep.
And let me just clarify. Are you say, like, in terms of comparing whether your salaries are appropriate? Or
Well, yeah, that, and whether or not we have enough staff. I know you identified one for, but what about teachers? What about administrators?
Okay, great. So let me give a little bit of background on that. So one of the things we tried to do as we went through this is triage the process and try to meet, we had to take a fairly broad view of the two organizations. We couldn't look at everything. So we tried to triage it based upon a couple things. One, we did some comparison to best practices. Some of those are in the report. Where there was something not meeting a best practice, that we put more focus on that area. In terms of the salaries, we were not doing a class and comp study or a detailed salary comparison, so I didn't want to dig too deep in there.
Okay.
But I did want to highlight that it is important, and in some cases you have that information and need to share it. I think the difference between the schools and the town, I think they need to update theirs a little bit more than you do. But we did talk about that on both. In some areas where we felt the staffing we didn't have something identified as an issue regarding staffing. So for example, it didn't come out from the employee survey where either the department said, let's say, I'm just going to pick one out. One department in the school, when we looked at the responses from that staff, they said, hey, we're comfortable, we're staffed appropriately, or we're meeting our needs. And we didn't have other departments referencing them as being problematic. We didn't make a recommendation for a change there. Similarly, it doesn't maybe show up quite as easily on the town side, but we had the similar approach there. So for example, if you look at the police department, well, that one has a more detailed workload analysis because it's a call for service driven. You notice where we looked and we said, hey, they're appropriately staffed. We're not making any recommendation for changes. So we didn't really dig in there. And it was sort of the similar approach there. So in some cases, like administration, we did look at that. You're not top heavy. We had no cuts, probably a little bit on the lean side, but we also felt that things that needed to be getting done were getting done. So we didn't make a recommendation for a change there.
Well, and that's nice to hear. I think I wanted to get that out there for the public to hear, because we hear so many times that the school they're all top heavy, and and I just want the public to understand that we are very lean. So thank you for saying that.
In some cases you are, in some cases other things drive the staffing approach. But we did sort of use an approach where we start at the highest level to triage and sort through. Then look at another level and work our way through, trying to pull different things in. We were clear from the beginning. We weren't going to superimpose our judgment on the schools or the town in terms of certain service levels or service requirements. That's your choice to make. But we were trying to look to say, how do you compare to others in certain areas? And is there something that shows a major problem that needs to be addressed? So,
thank you. I appreciate
it.
Yeah, I think I'd like to follow up a little bit with that as well. And the following, when I first read the draft, there's a series of best practices for the schools, and there really wasn't a clear indication of where those best practices came from. And so anybody looking at it, like the public, might question best practice to whom, what, where, when, how. Best practice depends on, are you in New England? Are you in Rhode Island? Are you in Nebraska? Is this a national? And so I was a little disappointed that there wasn't more of that deep dive. But I again, maybe you can explain what is best practice per whom?
Well, a great question. I mean, they come from a variety of sources. Some of them are tailored specifically to you based upon Rhode Island statutes. Others are prevailing practices for school or town operations. Some would be, not all of the best practices. Let me just be clear. They're best practices. They're not standards. So most of those that we listed are not requirements you have to meet or not meet, but there are ways for us to triage and say, are we meeting what is a typical approach in an organization of this size or complexity? It was not meant to be a statutory checklist that are you meeting every statute on the school side, for example, that you're required to comply with. That's something, you do on your own. But it was a way to sort of look through staffing issues, operational practices, technology use, try to do a really broad overview of each organization and try to highlight and find the most critical things to focus on. That brings me to a point where I want to reiterate at this point, one of the things that I think we talked about the continuous improvements both organizations have been going through. I don't want to downplay that. That's really important. Both organizations have a long way to go in some areas in terms of being, top notch, the person that people are emulating, but there's a lot of positives going on here also. On the town side, as you notice, when we looked at those things that they had been doing, I mean, some of those were foundational, let's say having an appropriately updated personnel manual or financial policies. Those are things that are just expected. And until you put those in place, the more advanced things can't take place. And in some cases, where there were, like on the educational side, there are a lot more detailed policies that you have in place. So we didn't spend time talking about those because they were there. So that's the one downside of an audit, is it focuses on the changes that need to be made sometimes rather than highlighting the strengths or the positives. And so we tried to bring some of that in through the best practices to give you credit that you can use to say, hey, there are things on both sides that are going well. But I do want to reiterate again, they're not standards, they're best practices. They come from a variety of sources. Some were specific to you based upon Rhode Island requirements, others for the educational industry, and others are general organizational principles.
Thank you for that. Just one final other question. I don't know if I saw it in the report, and we got the final one fairly late today, so weren't able to fine tooth it all. So I was kind of, you said something about asking, employees, what do you think? You have too much work, less, whatever. I know that for a fact that we've added custodians, but we've used federal dollars for that. During my tenure on school committee, I know we have cut those positions. So you might not have heard that from employees right now. I'm not sure what you heard, because we have some extra positions that are being funded that will no longer probably be there when the funds goes away.
Right.
So I would have liked to have seen something like, this is how many square feet the schools have building wise, and the national standard for custodial services per square foot. And, right now you might be meeting it, but that's because we're using federal dollars for some of those positions. That was the first thing. And then, for example, IT, if you look at how many machines that the school basically takes care of, because all of our teachers have them, our students have them, I have always thought and believe that we have a skeleton crew trying to maintain those machines. And yet I didn't hear anything, I don't think, about that in the report. So I was kind of a little bit surprised at that as well.
Yeah, so great points you bring up. And one thing I should reiterate is when we were looking at staffing, we were looking at current staffing, current approaches. So if you were to reduce those staffings, it could change a recommendation we might have made. On the employee survey, and if I didn't say this at the beginning, and let me say it now, and I do understand some of you just got the report today, so you may not have read it in detail, but I would say this anyways, even if you'd had it for a month. You are going to be probably using this over the next year or longer. Questions are going to come up. You should feel free to reach out to me. If you need me to join a school committee meeting by Zoom because you have a question or two, I'd be happy to do that. That's part of what our service to answer questions. The employee survey really was an important data point. I mean, we didn't make recommendations solely based upon that, but we do use that to get a good sense of the organizational culture and their perception. We do have the ability to cross-tab that further. If you have questions about, hey, would like to know what a specific segment felt, we can do that and share broad information. We need to be careful about doing it in a public document where it could self-disclose individuals. But I do know when we looked at that, for example, on the IT side, because that issue came up before and we did look at that, we did not have a lot of concerns raised from the employees focusing on IT specifically. Now, not to say that there isn't one, but there were other issues that they raised more that we focused on more than that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Anything else from my committee? We're good. Thank you, Madam President.
Members of the council, questions? Mr. LeBlanc.
Thank you for your presentation tonight. Two quick questions for you. What's the best practice for towns to do these performance audits? I can't remember the last time the town of Coventry ever did one. So is it supposed to be like every 30 years, every 10 years?
There is no best practice. I will tell you it varies. There are organizations that do them periodically, every decade or so. We've worked with organizations that take a slightly different approach, and they do a more detailed assessment of a department. And, you know, we've worked with several clients over the years where they do one or two a year, but they do a deep dive into the minutia by department. And so they might take them 6 years or 8 years to get through the entire organization, but that's how they feel that that's a better approach for them.
Got it.
We've had other ones who do sort of a higher level one, sort of like this, and then say, hey, as we build our foundation and we get some things in place, now we really want to focus on a specific area. And they may look at very specific issues to try to deal with it. So there isn't a right or wrong. I think it's one where you should find what works best for you. I do think you have a lot on your plate right now. And these are just things that we're suggesting you do. I know you also have a bunch of priorities of your own that you're focusing on. Mm-hmm. And just make sure you balance the organizational capacity to implement some of that before adding more on.
And then thank you for that. Yeah. And any of your previous clients ever asked you to come back maybe 2 or 3 years later to see how the changes were implemented?
We've done that a couple times. I would say it's less common than typical practice, but yes, there are organizations that do that. We've done a couple where one was 1 year after and one was 2 years after. We've also seen it in some RFPs where they build it in and say, we want to have an assessment after that. So
it's a good idea.
Definitely things that can be done. I think we talk a little bit in the report, and I think I talked more about it last time. I think what's most important moving forward is somehow you come to a meeting of the mind of what implementation plan you do want to use. Mm-hmm. And then you ask for periodic reports on progress to that.
Completely
That's
agree.
the only way to keep you apprised of what's moving forward. But it also ensures that staff then brings back to you. These are things that the school committee or the town council, this is now, we need your input. Either we need funding to implement this, we need a policy change, or we need your action. You know, that's where they hold not you accountable, but say, all right, now it's your turn to make a decision, and then we'll move forward with that. So
perfect. Thank you very much. Yeah. And then one more question, Mr. Marchand. I know I just got the full report today. How about for taxpayers? Are you going to post this to the website, or has it already been posted?
We certainly will.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Other questions? Mrs. Shockley.
Javit, thank you. I really appreciate your time. I'm wondering, when you say FTEs, just specifically to the police in this situation, is it the number of employees they have currently, or the number of full-time positions they have budgeted for?
So most of our staffing assessments are done based upon your authorized budgeted strength. If there is an issue in turnover or vacancies, that's a different issue. That's one where you need to fill it or address issues for why you can't keep people. But that's a different issue than I need another body. What we're trying to focus on is the policy decision. Do I need to add another position and fund another position? Or do I need to fill the ones that I currently have budgeted? Because those are really two different issues organizationally. So most of our analysis is done on the authorized budgeted strength that you're planning to fill. We do look, so if there were an area where we were to look and say, hey, the performance is really low, and we look and we say, well, a third of their positions are vacant. Well, that's why. They don't need more people. They need bodies in the slots they currently have.
Okay. Kind of brings me back to Mrs. Patno's question, though. When some of their positions are not budgeted per se, they're being paid for by outside money. Were you counting them anyway? Because
on the school side or on the
school? Well, just because it brought me back to her question. Yeah. Because they were funding some of these, for instance, maintenance positions with outside money outside of their budget. How did you count that? And are you even sure? Because this federal money is so weird.
Well, let me see. So on the facility side, I know we're looking at the number needed on a permanent full-time basis. So that's where that recommendation come from. On the custodial, I'll have to look to see how we factored in the ones being funded out of the ARPA and other funds.
Gotcha. Facilities versus custodial.
Right.
Also, it seemed like you were saying before that facilities recommendations were kind of based on current building needs as well. So because of the age of our buildings, we need more facilities people because there's more work to be done.
Well, that is typically true, that older, poorly maintained facilities require increased numbers of staff, because you in that case, you wouldn't apply a national standard in terms of square footage or whatever, because they can't maintain it effectively. You can use it as a broad parameter of the staffing requirements, and then you have to adjust it. I think the point I was trying to make is capital investments for both organizations need to be looked at very holistically and comprehensively, so you can figure out how you move forward. And I know this is a difficult discussion. You spent a lot of time on it, but it's not going away. Your facilities are going to continue to get older. They need regular investment, whether that's replacement, updating, in order to ensure that you're not spending money ineffectively,
Good money after bad.
Right, exactly. I was trying to say get a phrase, but I didn't want to butcher it. The problem is if you don't replace roofs when they need to replace, or replace your boilers or your air conditioning or whatever it might be, in the short term you can get by and you don't really notice the operational impact, but it's there. Whereas you make that capital investment, you can then theoretically reduce some of your operating costs, including staffing, or forego adding additional staff. And that's why we tried to time it a little bit, that you need to get the asset management system in place, get the condition assessments and the facility needs identified so you can load it into the system and do that long range plan so that all of you can make that tough decision. And that's not easy. I have no doubt when you do it, I'll come back and look at it. I have no doubt it's going to be more than your funding stream will allow you to easily address. You're going to have to make some tough decisions. But without that information, I don't know how you move forward and make decisions that make everyone happy, or educate the public on, yes, we have a major need on both sides of the organization, and we've got to find a way to prioritize that. And here's what our revenue stream will support. And it may not be what we want it to support, but that's what we can support. So I think that's really important to do sooner rather than later. And I know we put that into 2023 just because I don't think there's time to do it before then. But it's something that should be a real high priority, because that's probably the largest number out there, but it's also the potential to give you the greatest gain moving forward.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
And then my final question for the public is, when looking at programs, did you look at things in the town where, possibly there should be more fee income, or at the school level, maybe programs that they should think about cutting, or a way of looking into that on their own if you didn't?
And we talked a little bit about part of this annual review for fees and charges. There are certain functions like the building function, planning and building permitting should be 100% cost recovery. So those doing development in your community typically pay the full freight. You can make policy decisions to say, no, we're going to, for competitive reasons, because we want to be, have our fees in line with our surrounding communities and not disadvantage development. Well, we won't go for that. But the best practice is full cost recovery. When you look at, for example, recreation programming, there are certain tiers or types of programs that are full cost recovery, but there are other programs you offer and you say, we're only going to recover 25% of the cost of providing this because we're meeting an unmet need, or we're providing it for a disadvantaged population where we can't expect them to pay the full freight. It is something I could send you some information on which types of programs and services typically are full cost recovery versus partial. Same thing on the educational side is we didn't evaluate the educational programming per se, but where there are charges, you can look at those also in the same way. Sports programs is one where it's never 100%, but you can have some fees to help offset some of the costs for that sometimes.
Thank you. I was talking more fees on the town side and programming on the school, but I appreciate that.
Sure.
Questions? Yeah, I have a question. I have a couple questions relating to the recommendation list.
Sure.
First of all, each of the recommendations is assigned a priority, high, medium, or NA. Now, help us understand how you identified whether something was a high, a medium, or an NA.
Okay, so NA meant it not applicable. It didn't really have a priority, so it's either probably something ongoing or should be ongoing. But so high priority we sort of evaluate those based upon the potential to have the greatest impact on the organization, either for improving efficiency, reducing costs, addressing a critical need. A medium priority obviously is a step down from that. If we had a low one, it means, hey, it's a nice to do, but the return on investment might not be that much. So focus on the high priorities where you're going to get the biggest impact. Having said that, we have a separate column that has a timing,
Right.
and those don't always align. So you will see some high priorities that are in the out years. And that's principally because either you need to fund it, so you need time to budget, or it's going to take time. So it doesn't make sense to put it this year because there's no way you're going to get to it. So we're trying to be realistic in balancing that. But those are sort of based upon our understanding of how important that would be to your organization to improve operations, address a identified deficiency, or reduce costs. That's sort of how we went high, medium, or low, or not applicable. I hope we typically use when it is like an ongoing thing. So it doesn't matter what the priority is. It's something you just need to do.
So, did you have a matrix in which you were assigning values to come up with higher, medium?
It's not one that is, a 1+1 and it gets to
Okay.
this. It's sort of a subjective one based upon our collective team's discussion of what we think this impact would be for your organization.
Okay. And my second question really has to do, and I just arbitrarily chose two recommendations.
Sure.
One is number 11, add a budget and finance manager position to the department. So that I can understand. But then number 53 says, establish priorities for simplifying union contracts and upcoming negotiation cycles. Now, three of us who are sitting here today are in negotiation cycles right now. But how would we even attempt to establish priorities for simplifying union contracts and upcoming negotiation cycles? Because there are a number of recommendations that are similar to this.
Okay.
How do you tackle something like this?
So I think what we're trying to get to here is things like identifying what those highest priorities for changes you might want to make within there, but looking at the contract language from the perspective of, are there ways for us to make changes here that would simplify our operations, whether that's scheduling issues that are having operational impacts on the organization, staffing requirements that are impacting your efficient provision of services. It could include things for salary, time off. We weren't doing an in-depth contract evaluation, but what we're trying to get out there is that's the one opportunity until the contract expires to make some changes and to look at it from the lens of, is this impacting our operation in a potentially an unintentional way? Or maybe it was intentional. It doesn't matter. But are there ways for us to simplify this for our overall administration? So can we get greater consistency between bargaining units in terms of policies and practices? Because the more one-off provisions you have in there, and if every contract is different, it's harder to administer from an HR perspective. It's harder to administer from a town manager perspective, and it's harder to administer from an elected officials perspective. So you're always going to have differences. We're trying to say, that's an opportunity to look at ways to improve things and figure out what's really important there. It's really not the wages. Wages are important, but you're always looking at those time off, leave, those type of things. But there are other things in there that impact operations just as much. And so since we were going through this effort of recommending a lot of things, sort of like putting the personnel manual update in place, obviously that applies to non-bargaining representative people principally if you're doing it unilaterally. But it's the same approach in looking at the same reasons you want that in place is looking at the union contracts from that lens of, Can we improve this? Can it make our operations better? And getting the union to buy into that sometimes also. Sometimes talking about why it's problematic for the organization, you can come up with a different solution, or it was put in place 25 years ago and nobody's really thought about it since then. That's all we're trying to do. It wasn't a major one to say, hey, these 5 collective bargaining provisions are out of line and it should be axed,
Mhm. And what is the typical process by which a community who has hired you as a consultant takes this report and then starts to work its way through it? Because this is over 100 pages long. It's got dozens and dozens of recommendations by years, by priorities. So what's the next step that a typical group would do or
Typical
follow?
group would ask their respective executives, managers to provide some sort of a report back with feedback on it. Because as I said, the town manager, the superintendent may not agree with 100% of the recommendations. We talked about them all. We made modifications we thought were appropriate. There still may be some that they don't completely agree with or our timing. To say, here's our response to the report, and here's how we would suggest the implementation plan move forward so that there's something that both organizations could adopt. And say, all right, here's what we're going to do with this report. There's 2 benefits from that, I think. One is it ensures that you as policymakers on whichever side you're sitting and your managers are on the same page in terms of how you're going to move forward with it. But it also sets the expectation of what that implementation plan is going to be. So then the public knows here's how the town or the schools are going to move forward with this. Otherwise, they're going to look at the report and they're going to say a year from now, oh, this was supposed to be done in 2022 and they haven't even talked about it or it hasn't happened. And so that's, this is, like I said, our best estimate of how you can move forward. But if you adopt something, you build that trust with the public. If there's something you're not going to do, you say, we're not going to do this for X reason. But at least everyone understands that. And then there's not that disconnect that it's a report that you put on the shelf and nothing got done with it. And that's why I think I mentioned in response to you is a periodic report. Could be even semi-annually, but at least some report back to say, once you've adopted that, here's the progress we're making. Because the whole purpose of this is it's going to take staff time. So they want to spend it where you want them to spend it and where you're going to support them. And then as part of budget discussions, we see a lot of organizations use this to say, all right, what's it going to take in next year's budget for us to move this forward? And if you can't fund it, then you have to update your implementation plan because we don't have the resources to move forward with that. But that way, you're continually talking about how to move your organization forward. Your strategic plan can then flow down to the annual work plans, performance measures, performance audit implementation. It's seamlessly together rather than sort of disjointed efforts. And I think that's the best approach to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions from members of the school committee, from the town council? Okay, we'll now open up to public comment. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on the performance audit? We'll have another public comment section at the end of the meeting, during which time you can make a comment on any topic, but this public comment section is for the performance audit. Is there anyone who would wish to speak who's in the audience today? Please raise your hand. Okay, is there anyone on Zoom who would like to speak? Please raise your hand in the chat. I don't see any hands raised. One more time. Anyone would like to make a public comment? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pennington. Appreciate the time you spent with us and the time you spent in talking to members of the school, the Coventry Public Schools and the Town of Coventry Municipal Government. Thank you. Chairperson Patna, would you please close your meeting?
Thank you, Madam President. Can I have a motion to adjourn at, looks like, does anyone have the time?
Oh, I'm sorry.
7:56.
Yep.
Madam Chair, make a motion to adjourn at 7:56.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Give him the crack in.
Okay, agenda item E1, resolution adopting the town of Coventry operating and capital budget of $114,412,265 for the fiscal year 2022 to 2023 for presentation at the financial town meeting on May 24th, 2022, and all-day referendum on May 26th, 2022, as per Town Charter Section 8.18A. Resolution is found on page 13 to 15. Because this is so important, I'm going to read for the public the resolution that the town council hereby adopts or accepts the town manager's proposed FY23 general operating and capital improvements budget and recommends to the financial town meeting an all-day referendum as set forth in section 8.18 of the town of Coventry Home Rule Charter the following actions. Section 1, that $32,353,708 be appropriated from tax revenues, federal and state aid, and other revenues for the operation of the municipal government as set forth in Exhibit A, which is attached. Section B, that $50,023,936 be appropriated from tax revenue for the operation of the school department, with $50,023,936 being the maintenance of effort. These funds shall supplement state aid to education grants and other school revenues to provide an operating budget of $75,989,151. Section 3, that $4,021,004 in tax revenues, interest earnings, and state aid be appropriated for the retirement of principal and interest on outstanding bonded indebtedness and authorizing the issuance of revenue anticipation notes as provided in chapter section 8.51. Section 4, the $955,354 be appropriated for capital improvements. And section 5, that the town clerk and town manager are hereby authorized and directed to place a single question upon the ballot for a financial town meeting on May 24th, 2022, an all-day referendum, May 26th, 2022, in accordance with Charter Section 8.18, requesting approval of the foregoing in one single ballot question to approve or reject, which question shall include an authorization to levy a tax in accordance with Title 44, Chapter 5, along with the quarterly payments due, the dates thereof, and all interest and penalties to be levied and collected thereon if such payments are late, and to take any other action to properly place the budget before the voters in appropriate form and in accordance with law. The same shall be presented, noticed, and warned in accordance with Title 45, Chapter 3 of the General Laws of Rhode Island. May I have a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Marchand, any comments?
We had two public hearings last week on Monday, the 25th and Saturday, the 30th. And there were some good questions and comments from the public that I thought the public engagement was good. And most respects, there seems to be support for the budget as proposed. And while there have been a number of ideas circulated individually by various people, by and large, there's a lot of support for the budget. And I have no further changes to recommend at this time.
Thank you. Superintendent Levis is not here. Assistant Superintendent Coward, would you wish to make any comments about this resolution? Okay, thank you. We'll take each section at a time for discussion. Any member of the council may amend a section without specifics or amend a line item in the municipal, which is section 1, school, which is section 2, debt service, section 3, or capital improvement, section 4. If you amend a section, then the manager has the ability to move money in any line item as he wishes. If you submit an amendment based on a specific line item and the amendment is approved, and the subsequent change to the section is changed, then the change in the line item is required. Yes, Mr. Marchand?
Just for clarification, I wish to highlight that there is a, when we move forward after this vote, we do intend to break out for clarity purposes that there is 110,000 budgeted. Well, actually, it's more than that. It's $1,110,372 for the school CIP and maintenance of effort. And that's part of the 75 million number, not part of their operating appropriations. And so I just wanted to call that out, that they do have capital funding in their number separate from the 955 that's called out for the municipality. And we haven't broken it out, but I know that for the school, 700.
Thank you.
700,000 was for their maintenance workers, skilled tradespeople, and they had 285,000 or some for buildings and maintenance and repairs. And so all those numbers together represent the investment in their maintenance of effort, which is a total of 2.2 million. And that is funded, but it isn't called out separately in section 2.
And would you repeat that number once again for us? What's in CIP? You started off the discussion with that number.
Yes. So the amount that the town is funding of the school CIP is $110,372.
Thank you. Okay. Discussion. Any members of the council have any questions or comments? Ms. Ludwig.
So in the public hearings, I could not make Saturdays. It was opening day softball. I'm an 8U coach for Coventry girls softball. I did watch the session afterwards. Thank you to my fellow counselors for attending that to make a quorum. The only feedback that I heard mentioned several times from that session, only a handful of conversations I've had with residents and the first public hearing was that there's a concern of using the full ARPA amount for the school capital. And so right now, I believe we are at a 275 overall levy increase. Is that correct? I said this at a previous meeting. I'm not married to the 275. Personally speaking, I don't watch a ton of news, but I do work in financial services. I do see the national stats ticking up. I do see, while there is market volatility and uncertainty around the world, that we are coming out of a pandemic. And I'd like to propose or amend that we increase the amount going to the school capital to help bridge the gap between the one-time ARPA funding and the hit I think we're going to have to take to make that maintenance number in the future for the 3% that in the last 2 or 3 years has now come to fruition. So for those who aren't aware, the full 3% that we have to put in on the school side, we have to fund ourselves or with the tax or with the ARPA funds. And I am okay using the majority of ARPA funds because I think it's there to help residents during the pandemic times. but I'm afraid of what's going to happen if we don't at least up that number just a little bit to help bridge the gap between using those funds this year and then basically falling off in the next 2.5 to 3 years. So I wanted to see if we could increase that levy rate from the 275 to 29 and apply that to the capital expenditures that we need to make on the school side, which would reduce slightly the amount of ARPA funds we need to use on this and build it slightly into the levy.
What is the exact figure that you would look for an increase?
I need some help from our finance director.
We'll need that number. And are you asking for that in section 2?
Give me a second. I just got to pull it up. Yes. So for example, the amount in section 2 would be increased by that slight levy proposed raise. I know it's not a lot.
So are you asking
But
for an increase in the appropriation, the total
Yes.
approach, not the capital, the total appropriation?
The total
to the school?
appropriation, so it's built into the levy.
The
So
total
it'd be an
appropriation.
overall increase of a 2.9.
That would give us an additional $111,398 that could go to the school capital maintenance of minimum maintenance requirement.
Yes, that's what I'd like to propose for discussion.
Would you repeat that number?
111,398.
Yes. Okay.
I know it's small. My assumption is that the other counselors were trying to stay under 3. But I am trying to listen to the residents' feedback, and we did hear several times people are concerned with using the full or 90+% of what we would have to make up for the school capital maintenance through solely ARPA funds.
Okay, we have a motion to amend section 2 to read, amend the appropriation in section 2 for the school by $111,398. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion. Ms. Lima.
I see Councillor Ludwig's point. A compromise I would be willing to make is not raising the tax levy increase, but rather pulling it from the town's capital and using ARPA funds there instead for that particular amount.
The motion is to increase the appropriation to the school by $111,398. Do we have to say where it comes from?
Yes, if you're going to raise the levy rate. No, if you are saying it's going to come from what's already been proposed.
Okay. Other discussion. Mrs. Shockley.
Can I ask the town manager if we were to raise the rate or go with Ms. Lima's recommendation or a combination of the two? Could we make sure that that goes into the restricted capital fund as well?
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. LeBlanc.
I kind of have a compromise here, I think. I don't want to raise the rates. I do like the 2.75. But at Saturday's meeting, I had asked both the superintendent and the town manager for a list of one-time expenses that were included in their FY 22-23 budget. Mr. Sands did give me a listing that comes to $55,150, which is essentially half of Vice President Ludwig's request. And what I propose is that we don't increase the rate, but we supplement the current budget. So leave the budget as is, and then we would give $55,150 of town ARPA funds to the school to cover these costs, which include new soccer goalposts, uniforms for lacrosse, uniforms for hockey, broken furniture at both the middle school, the high school, and Hopkins Hill, whiteboards, wall mats in the gym at Hopkins Hill. Washington Oak would be broken furniture and industrial laminator. And then they also wanted some snow plows. So 55,150 doesn't increase the levy at all. The budget stays the same. We would just be giving them some of our town ARPA funds, one-time revenues to offset one-time expenses.
Okay, the amendment is to increase the appropriation to the school by $111,398. If that does not pass, then we can entertain your amendment. Okay. Ms. Ludwig.
I think that's an appropriate and reasonable request for the five of us to consider. I can commit to using the ARPA funding for 55 and the change you mentioned from the town ARPA funding. And I can withdraw my original motion for the 111K if you'd like to make a motion on the 55.
I would make a motion.
Okay, just a moment.
Sure.
You're withdrawing your motion.
I'll withdraw.
Okay. All right, Mr. LeBlanc, an amendment to to section 2?
It's actually not an amendment to section 2. The budget is staying the exact same. So this is just a town council vote that the town will allocate 55,150 of the town's ARPA funds to the school outside of the budget. We're leaving the rate to 2.75, but we're just committing 55,150 for these exact expenses.
Okay, we're in the middle of a motion and a second for the resolution, which is on page 13 of 19. So we have to conclude this vote first before we entertain another vote. She withdrew that one, yes, but this is another motion that he's asking for, and we're in the middle of a vote for the resolution, I believe. Is that correct, Mr. D'Agostino?
Yes, there was a motion on the table, which is to approve the resolution as you presented. There was an amendment by Vice President Ludwig that has been withdrawn. And so Mr. LeBlanc is proposing an alternative, but it is not, as I understand it, to amend the motion that's before the assembly, which is the motion on the resolution as you read.
I agree. It's germane to the discussion, though, because what we're saying is the town council is still supporting the schools in a different manner. Hence why I brought up the motion.
So we can take that up after we vote on the resolution. Is that correct?
Yes, I would recommend that you have a vote on the motion that's in front of the assembly, in front of the council, and then take up Mr. LeBlanc's proposed motion, because it is somewhat separate, although, as he pointed out, it is related to the appropriation for section 2.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Marchant.
I'd just like to speak to the dynamics of how that changes this budget scenario. By replacing the $55,150 of the school's operating budget with ARPA funds, effectively that means we're reducing their operations budget by that 55,000 to replace it with the ARPA funds, and that 55,000 would have to go somewhere if it's not going to reduce the appropriation. So what is that other 55,150?
The town council is responsible for giving the schools a specific number for local appropriation, not by line item. So what I'm saying is that number is not changing. What we're currently still talking about is still going to go to the schools.
Okay.
So they can reclassify this 55,150 that they have currently in their budget to other line items that they deem that the school committee is responsible for doing, not the town council. So their current local appropriation in this budget is not changing. We're just giving them an additional 55,150 of our town ARPA funds, which it will not
affect the budget.
100% agree.
Got it.
But we're still discussing the motion and the second for the resolution, which is on page 13 to 15. Okay, Ms. Shockley.
So I have a question just in relation to reallocating the funds. The funds that are in CIP for the school are in a restricted account, but they're still within the school's budget.
Yes.
would it behoove us, in order to continue to add to that CIP budget and continue to lift it up, to change the budget and move 55,000 to that CIP account? And I might want Superintendent Levis's input on this. He's in the room. But just to make sure, I think part of our goal here is to keep the money within the school, but continue to add to the CIP. But possibly that's beyond our purview. I don't know.
Well, it changes a lot if you're going to move the money from operations to capital, because then you're removing it out of their maintenance of effort into the capital.
Then I withdraw my question. I do have a.
Go ahead. She's still speaking. Mrs. Shockley, you're finishing?
I'm going to move on to a new topic. So,
Okay.
Ms. Ludwig.
All right. Ms. Ludwig.
I believe Councillor Shockley was just asking the intent, so I wanted to clarify my intent is to build this into the levy, because I don't want us to get hit 2 or 3 years from now and take a major negative impact on the students, teachers, or anyone in the community by falling off a cliff when the ARPA funds disappear.
Mr. Marchand.
So my understanding with the motion that was withdrawn, the suggestion by Councillor LeBlanc about the 55,000 is just adding ARPA money that doesn't change anything about the town's investment of tax dollars into the CIP. Okay, thank you.
That just provides them with some more operations money in their appropriation to use for whatever purpose they want, because some of the things that they had designated for capital improvements would now be covered by the town's appropriation of opera funds, correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, any other discussion? Mrs. Shockley.
So I had been misunderstanding, I believe, where the CIP for the schools was. Up until this evening, I thought it was under the town's umbrella, and that moving funds between the town CIP and the school CIP was nothing but semantics, I think is how I said it. I now see I'm incorrect about that. And the movement of that money is actually truly a reallocation to the school's restricted fund from the town's side of the budget. Because of that, under section 2, I would like to make a motion. I apologize. I think this might be under section 4, but possibly both. I would like to make a motion to reduce the capital improvements on section 4 to $555,354 and increase by $400,000. We need $1.2 million this year for CIP, and we're $110,000. And I find that as we move into next year, and I just don't want to push this year's problem into next year. I do not want to reduce what we do for capital improvements to the town. I just want to increase what we use for ARPA funds this year.
Just so that we don't confuse or mislead the public, I would say that for the school's maintenance of effort, they have $1 million of appropriated town funds that they're using for the trades and the maintenance and repairs. So there is it's more like $1.1 million that is going towards the $2.2 million requirement.
But we're still $1.2 million short. Am I correct?
1.1, yeah.
Okay, we have an amendment.
I'll second.
To reduce in section 4, capital improvements by what number, please?
I wanted to reduce section 4 by $400,000, so to $555,354, and increase the appropriation to the school to $50,423,936.
Not the appropriation. It wouldn't be part of the maintenance of effort. it would be added to the overall number, the 75 million.
Okay.
Because we'll keep that 400,000 with the 110 in the restricted account.
Okay.
And the difference between the school having that as CIP money versus the town is they have discretion over how it gets spent. It will be in a restricted account so that it can only be expended on capital maintenance items, but they still have discretion about whether it's going to be a well or a whatever.
I think
roof.
That's fine. How much do you need me to restate?
Well,
Because it's actually, I'm changing section 2 to 76,389,151.
is that an increase by 400,000?
Yes,
Okay.
I amended that to 555.
Oh, okay. I don't know if she needed the
Oh.
full motion.
Right, sorry about that.
So right now we have an amendment for section 4 to reduce the appropriation in section 4 for capital improvements by $400,000. That leaves the number at $555,354. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So we'll start off with that amendment first, okay? All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. So I'll read the motion or the amendment. I'll reduce the capital improvement appropriation in section 4 by $400,000 so that the appropriation will be $555,354. Any other discussion? Mr. LeBlanc.
Just clarification here. I think all we're doing is reclassing the number for CIP is staying exactly the same. It's mechanics of if it's town or school, correct?
Correct.
So the budget's not changing?
Correct. This
Just wanted
doesn't
to
change the budget.
clarify that.
It puts it kind of in a balance where 500,000 in money is going to the school CIP and 500 to the town. And I believe the expectation is that any shortfall
Excuse
from
me.
any short
Dealing in millions here. I gotta concentrate, please. Go ahead.
anything less than what we had previously recommended for the CIP is intended to be made up by ARPA funds.
And just for confirmation purposes, not part of MOE.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Are we ready for this vote? Okay. This is a vote to amend section 4 by $400,000. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes,
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The amendment passes. Next, do we have another amendment for section 2? Mrs. Shockley.
I would like to amend section 2 to increase the overall operating budget to 76,389,151.
That's by 400,000, correct?
Mhm. Might as well check my math.
Okay.
I thought the motion we just did took care of everything.
No, it was just, we're doing section by section. Okay, do we have a second for that amendment?
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion. Okay, this is a roll call vote for the amendment to increase the appropriation in section 2 by $400,000. So that gives us, what number is it that you had down there?
$76,389,151.
Yes, thank you. Any more discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig.
Yes.
Mrs. Lima.
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley.
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc.
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The amendment passes. Are there any other amendments that anyone would like to offer at this time? Okay, are we ready to vote on the resolution with the amendments? Okay. The resolution, as read at the beginning of this discussion, section 1 remains the same. Section 2, the appropriation is increased to $76,389,151. Section 3 remains the same. Section 4. It is changed so that $555,354 of capital improvements is appropriated for the school. Is that correct?
That's for the municipal. Municipal.
That was the municipal. And $400,000 is for the school.
Point of information.
Yes.
So just thinking procedure wise, because I think we still need to have a discussion about the solution that Mr. LeBlanc had offered. Once we vote on this, though, this item is closed and we technically can't have that discussion. So shouldn't we have it before we vote and this item then moves on?
Well, we asked Mr. D'Agostino a few minutes ago.
But if it's not an agenda item, how can you have a discussion about it? Because you've already voted in.
Mr. D'Agostino?
The motion that Mr. LeBlanc is proposing is related to the overall budget, and that is what you're considering this evening, in addition to the specifics of the resolution that is going to go to the all-day referendum.
So we should have a conversation about what he's proposing before we go to the full vote.
No, because I think you don't have to, because I think what he's proposing is supplemental to the resolution that you're voting on, but it is related to the overall budget. So you can have a vote on the motion as amended, and then you can take up the specific request and motion that Mr. LeBlanc is proposing, because it is related to the overall municipal budget for the current fiscal year.
Okay, just want to make sure we're following the rules.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready for the vote on the amended resolution? Okay. This is the vote on the amended resolution. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion as amended is approved. Okay, now, Mr. LeBlanc.
I think for the third time.
Well, we're
all
in
good.
order based on what
It's all
Mr.
good.
D'Agostino has recommended to us.
I understand.
That's why we have
Following the rules.
council.
Following the rules.
Go ahead.
I would like to make a motion that $55,150 that relates to the list that Mr. Sands, Finance Director for Coventry Public Schools, provided me. That includes goalposts, lacrosse uniforms, hockey uniforms, broken furniture at the high school, broken furniture at the middle school, broken furniture at Hopkins Hill, broken furniture at Washington Oak, some whiteboards, some wall mats for the gym. All of that plus snow plows is included in a list that totals $55,150. I would like to make a motion that the town council provides this $55,150 to the school, supplemental of what we just voted on, so that these items can be replaced for the benefit of the students. I would appreciate if the if the school admin would memorialize this in some type of email or communication to the town manager that these ARPA funds will cover all of these expenses in the FY 22-23 school year.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. The motion is the town council appropriates $55,150 to the school from town opera funds. We have a motion and a second discussion. Mrs. Lima.
I just want to make a comment. I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Sands and to Councilor LeBlanc for the cooperation and working. I think this is a good idea with one-time funds on one-time purchases, and just appreciate the collaboration between the town and the schools. Thank you.
Any other discussion?
I would like to just add that this is 0.55% of the town's ARPA funds.
Okay, and did you also want to add that you wanted a written confirmation?
I already stated that, but yes.
Okay. All right, we ready for the vote? Okay, Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes. Thank you.
Should we also have a motion for the rest of the ARPA funds to go towards the balance of both school and municipal CIP amounts for tonight?
We don't have to do that tonight. We can prepare a resolution for that so that it's recorded in writing.
Mr. Marchant, or
Mrs. Shockley?
or Ms. Mills, as soon as you have it, could you let us know the levy change that should be expected?
Just, it's the same. It's the
No,
same.
no, not from that. Overall, from the 2.75%, the amount per thousand.
Right.
Thanks.
So maybe what we can do then, if we don't need a motion tonight for that, we can wait for a resolution for the ARPA funds. Maybe we can just have a verbal affirmation that we're ready to do that, just so people understand that we did not just reduce your CIP budget by $500,000. Personally, I'm committing to approve that in the next resolution that we have.
I think going right along with that is the expectation that the school in their proposed budget has committed $400,000 from ESSER funds as well as the town's ARPA funds to meet the minimum maintenance requirement. So with that understanding, I think we can proceed.
I would like to, since the school committee chairperson is here, I would like to ask her if there will be a commitment to use those funds for operations to meet the minimum maintenance requirement. Mrs. Patno or Superintendent Levis? What was voted on at the last school committee meeting?
They committed the 400,000 to the maintenance.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the money that we're going to provide from the town opera funds, which we just voted on this evening?
That goes in for a
I don't believe so.
That was the 50,150 that they just voted on. They'd like an acknowledgement in writing that Mr. Sands had provided those list of items that's what it would be for.
Yeah.
Okay, that's affirmative. Thank you. Okay. Are we ready to move on? Okay. Agenda item E2, reference pages 16 to 17, ratification of a resolution requesting the General Assembly to enact Bill H 7616 relating to the Department of Healthy Aging. Mr. Robillard, would you please speak to this?
This particular resolution is coming before the Finance Committee at the State House. It still hasn't been scheduled on their schedule yet. A lot of the work that the senior centers have been doing across since the beginning of COVID is making sure that our seniors get the services that they need. The former Department of Elderly Affairs was reduced to a Division of Elderly Services and ultimately an Office of Healthy Aging. And now they have a third of the staffing that they had previously and aren't, I think they need to build capacity. A lot of the work that we've been doing is around the population growth that's going to happen in the senior population over the next 10 to 15 years. 1 in 4 Rhode Islanders will be over the age of 65. And the need for those services to be improved, centralized, and supported with staffing, oversight, and funding is a lot of the work that we've been doing. This particular resolution has been passed in multiple communities in our state, prioritizing seniors and making sure that those services are shored up because the needs are going to be increasing over time.
Thank you. May I have a motion to ratify this resolution?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any other discussion by members of the council? Ms. Ludwig?
I just had a quick question. So I reviewed the bill and the resolution. What are kind of the major changes between what's in place now? I know the name change, some of those things, but
It's increasing capacity. It's increasing funding to when they moved it to an Office of Healthy Aging, a lot of that funding for when it was a department went to other departments. And so the services for seniors weren't centralized or utilized in comparison to where they were previously around elderly abuse and protective services, around funding for local senior centers. The capacity to provide increased services has been reduced. Senior centers in general have up to 8 funding sources to make sure that they can do their operations and provide services to elders in the state. And a lot of the advocacy that we've been doing as senior center directors is around making sure that we're able to continue to gain access for our seniors across the state for the basic needs that they need. COVID has shown that more than anything else. They've had the highest loss of life, the highest level of isolation, and also decline in mental health and physical health over time. There are some increasing numbers of research around those areas and the need to have a healthy aging format for the state and the 10-year plan on making sure those needs are met is a lot of the work that this has been focused on. So it's more, let's have a cohesive way of dealing with senior issues and the needs that are going to be developing because of the amount of seniors that'll be retiring. Folks that are in the baby boomer generation. There's a significant number of folks that will be needing these services in the future, whether it is caregivers that need to make sure that their seniors and parents are getting those services, or it is that kind of sandwich generation where we have seniors who are providing care for their grandchildren, or family members that have to take care of their children and their parents or their grandparents at the same time. And there needs to be a cohesive plan of what that's going to, what those needs and how they're going to be addressed. And that's a lot of the focus, particularly with this particular piece of legislation. It's starting the conversation more than anything else, saying seniors need to be prioritized because their needs are going to be increasing.
thank you.
Any other questions by members of the council? Mr. Robillard, thank you so much for taking the lead on this in our community and in the state. We greatly appreciate it. Council members, are you ready for the vote? Okay. Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next agenda item, resolution to appoint town moderator for the financial town meeting to be held on Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 at 7 p.m. The resolution reference page is 18. The town council of the town of Coventry hereby, I should say, take a motion. May I have a motion to appoint John J. Bevilacqua, Esquire, as moderator for the annual financial town meeting to be held at 7 o'clock on May 24th, 2022.
I'll make the motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Roll call? Yes. Ms. Ludwig.
I think we had 2 excellent candidates. And this was a very, very difficult decision. So thank you to both of them.
Thank you, Ms. Ludwig. Okay, roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig?
No.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
No.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon? Yes. 3 yeas, 2 nays. The motion passes. Thank you. Next, resolution to appoint Detective Jason Jordan to the Coventry Police Pension Board. This is resolution reference page 19. This is a resolution that a Detective Jason Jordan be appointed for an expired term of 3 years ending on April 9th, 2025. May I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
May I have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Mr. Marchand, any discussion because you are on the pension board yourself?
Yes, this is a position to be represented by a member of the International Brotherhood of Police Union, and this was their nomination.
Thank you. We ready for the roll call vote? Ms. Ludwig,
Yes.
Mrs. Lima,
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley,
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc,
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays, the motion passes. Agenda F, President Dixon updates on May activities and meetings. I'm going to give a long list of things that the council is actively engaged in and also a list of some of the community activities. We are not getting a great deal of attention for these meetings, and I want to promote these meetings and activities in this forum so that perhaps we can increase attendance at the activities. So first of all, tomorrow, May 3rd, District 1 School Committee vote from 8 o'clock to 8 p.m. There are 2 locations. If you do not know where to vote, you can contact Laurie Anderson. If your usual...
That'll start at 7 a.m.
Oh, it does start at
7 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Oh, thank you so much. If you vote at Precinct A1, St. Francis, or Precinct 1B, Maple Root, you will vote at St. Francis at 132 Peckham Lane. If your precinct is 1C and you usually vote at Summit Baptist, or Precinct 1D and you usually vote at Weston Coventry, you will vote at Summit Baptist at 1176 Victory Highway. Next item, May 9th, there is a Central Coventry Fire District meeting and referendum. May 16th, there will be an open house at the Coventry Resource Center on Wood Street. This is from 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. 2 council members, Ms. Ludwig and Mrs. Lima, are planning this program, and I'll have each of them speak a little bit about what the open house is. Ms. Ludwig.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're excited. We're going to do this open house on Monday, May 16th. It'll be very free flowing. Come and go as you'd like. We're going to be recognizing a number of members within the community. We'll have some budget information out there just so you can take it with you. In case you have any questions, we'll have some staff there. We'll have the counselors there. Some of the school committee should be there. And we're not only going to recognize some of the community members, but some of the organizations within town as well. And it will be a great opportunity for those of you, just because of COVID, who may not have checked out the new resource center. So we welcome you to come join us. Hopefully it'll be a nice day. So we're actually going to open up into the patio, and it'll be kind of a celebration of the community and things that we've achieved over the last year. It's not going to be a sit-down meeting. There's going to be no formal speeches, much more free-flowing. So we hope you can join us. We're going to do some light refreshments, and you should see some information come out in the next week or 2 on social media. So if everyone can help us pass that message along, that would be great. Ms. Lima.
Thank you. Mrs. Lima?
Vice President Ludwig covered it real well, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay, thank you. May 21st is super interview day for boards and commissions. People who have applied for a position on a board or commission, we will be having our annual super interview day, in which we will start interviewing candidates at 8:30 in the morning. The council members will be here, and we will just do this as quickly and efficiently as possible. Ms. Matrano, how many have signed up so far to be interviewed? About 10 will be coming in, and hopefully we still have many openings. Some more openings have opened up today. So please do look at the website, and you'll see the number of boards and commissions for which we do have openings. Some of these are because members have decided that they want to move on to other activities. And in some cases, people have moved out of town or they're not available anymore. So we do have a number of openings. On May 23rd, the town council will be having an executive session. On May 24th, the town financial meeting. This is an information meeting. No changes will be made to the budget at this time as per our charter, section 818. The meeting will start at 7 o'clock at the Coventry High School. On May 25th, there'll be a comprehensive plan advisory committee meeting. We'll host a public meeting to obtain input from residents on their views relating to their community. This will be from 6 to 8 o'clock at night in the Coventry Resource Center on Wood Street. On May 26th, there's an all-day Town of Coventry referendum at a variety of polling sites. On Monday, the 30th, there'll be Memorial Day celebration starting at the Anthony Green. On June 8th, at 1 o'clock, there will be a Portuguese flag raising at the town hall. Last year, it was held at the annex across the street. Rhode Island Day of Portugal visits cities and towns across the Rhode Island during this particular month of June. And we did participate. Mrs. Lima and I were there last year. On June 13th, there's a joint town council meeting with the school committee to discuss town and school facilities planning, a debrief of the school construction referendum vote, and a debrief of the referendum for the budget vote. We also expect the EDC, the Economic Development Commission, to make a presentation. And we will also have recommendations by the Charter Review Commission concerning their recommendations for changes to the charter. On June 13th, from 5 to 7, will be 14th for Flag Day. Thank you. June 14th from 5 to 7 will be Flag Day. Local Coventry Boy Scout troops will be in town, and we will have a Flag Day ceremony at the town hall. And June 27th, there will be a town council meeting. And then we might take a couple weeks rest, and then we'll be back in July again. But this gives you our May and June schedule. So it's very busy. The council is very busy, not only sitting here at meetings, but also planning other activities to engage the public. Now available for public comment. Is there any member of the who is with us this evening who would like to make any comment about any topic whatsoever? If you will, please raise your hand, be recognized, and come and state your name and address. Is there anyone here who would like to make a comment? Is there anyone joining us remotely? Please raise your hand in the chat. Mr. Horton, how many people are with us on chat this evening or on Zoom? 9. I'm sorry, what?
I don't know about the YouTube account.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any comments, public comment? We conducted a lot of important business this evening. Okay. May I have a motion to adjourn the town council meeting at 8:47 PM?
I will make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll
May I-
second.
Second. Roll call vote of the council. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon, yes. 5 yeas, no nays. The motion is adjourned at 8:47 PM. Thank you all for coming.